You are listening to Armchair Healthcare, a podcast on pills, placebos, and policy.
All right, welcome to Armchair Healthcare. What's up, Max?
Well, a few things, and one thing I want to talk about is just a continuation from last week. We were talking about OMEROs.
Okay.
Well, some OMEROs cult members, Omorocytes, Omorons?
Morons, I like that.
Yeah, Omorons. So they were offended that out of the 10 things in the pipeline list, I did not talk about their OMS 721 in the stem cell transplant related issue. It's called TMA.
This is what I was talking about. Like, they have all these things on these trials that literally they've never talked about. Like, this is not what this company is doing. This stem cell thing with 721?
Yes, no. So it's to treat post-transplantation thrombotic microangiopathy. So okay. So they actually do talk about it, and it is in their investor deck.
Okay.
So but the way it's billed by these Omorons is that this is a near-term approval.
They're going to get approved for this?
Yeah, it's a near-term approval. But what the company's not saying this. What the company is saying is that they are, in discussions with the FDA and the EU regulatory authorities on what the paths to approval would be.
Okay.
So they haven't even submitted yet. So I don't know how this is a near-term approval. And right now, these people, these Omorons are saying is that they're going to get approval on data from 19 patients where the comparator is historical controls.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah, especially since I found this paper from an oncology journal which talks about TMA, and it says that it's a poorly defined clinical entity, that the manifestations characteristically described for post-transplantation TMA are not specific.
The post-translational TMI?
TMA.
I like that Freudian slip right there. Quit telling me about your transplant, man. It's gross.
Funny. Other transplantation-related complications often coexistent in these patients may account for these manifestations. So basically, this might not really exist. And also, they say accurate assessment of TMA is difficult because the nonspecific clinical features have resulted in extreme variations of reported frequency following stem cell transplant. So, with the frequency being between 0.5 and 64%, and mortality between 0 and 100%.
Wow. That's a poorly defined indication, if there ever was one.
A little bit. And so, in the OMEROS data, at the 100-day survival endpoint, that really well-trodden 100-day survival endpoint, that's always meaningful.
That's like 3 months and a week.
Yeah. So they had 53% survival versus, at that point, versus 10% in historical controls.
Oh,
That's great. So they picked all the people who were going to die.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. It's like, guys, just this is. I don't think the FDA can really even begin to understand what the data or like what the indication really is. And I mean, I think the inclusion criteria for this trial was relatively broad. Mm-hmm. They're going to have to do a real trial with like real inclusion criteria, something defined. There'll have to be some comparator. Like, there are actual treatments for this off-label. Like Soliris is used for this.
Makes sense.
There's a variety of different things that doctors try. So it's not like it's immoral to do this trial because you can't just give the patients nothing. No, you can give them physician's choice in a trial, and let's see what happens then. I mean, I can't see the FDA approving it on this. this is almost literally no data.
Well, this can we talk about the morons? Can we talk about the broader problem of just these guys cropping up? And there's just certain stocks where this happens, where people seem to just completely fall in love, or at least they start drinking the management's Kool-Aid. And some of these could be fine companies, but the people, the investor base, at least in Twitter, is just ravenous. Where like you can't, there's no reason discussion anymore. It's just these guys, they're clinging to anything. You know what I mean? Like these guys just failed their major indication. Like, yeah, it's gonna have a big impact on the stock. Yeah, we're gonna talk about it, but I don't know. There's some like this. I mean, we seem to be focusing on them. I think TG Therapeutics has got a bit of a following out there. Mankind's got a bit of a following. We're like literally picking stocks to talk about on the podcast that are going to piss off a lot of randos out there on the internet.
Well, though I think
Tesla. I mean, look at what we're doing here, Max.
I know we are sort of like starting fires, but on TG Therapeutics, I didn't get that much pushback because I mean, what the management did was quite obviously ridiculous. There was not much wiggle room there.
Yes.
Yeah. All of these cult stocks, and the discussion always gets to the place where it's like, who's paying you to say these things? And it's like, okay, nobody. I don't have a position in these stocks that I'm talking about.
It's just fun, man.
Yeah, we're doing this because we really enjoy looking at stocks. I mean, we like looking at stocks that we like, and we like looking at stocks that we don't like. We love our jobs. This is, and poking holes in theses or feces is fun. It's not. I'm not part of a wolf pack. Adam Feuerstein and I, and like whatever random short sellers that you guys can think of, we were not sitting around a cafe and thinking, who are we going to screw next? And we don't go to the Stonecutters meeting. Well,
I'm just going to be honest that if that group exists, the wolf pack, I'm actually kind of sad they didn't invite me. I feel a little bit left out. If Adam Feuerstein and the rest of the wolf pack are sitting around some cafe, I want to be invited. I want to at least show up.
Okay, if we actually ever found a wolf pack, we'll invite you.
Okay.
But there is no wolf pack. It's just intelligent people all coming to the same conclusion about the same crooked companies.
Yes.
And that's just the way it is. And well, moving on to another company that, not crooked, just I don't know what to make of them. So MNLO Therapeutics.
Okay.
They just went public in January.
Mm-hmm.
They've already had 2 trial failures. It's only been 10 months, and
yes,
they're not just your normal trial failures. These are trial failures where placebo outperformed their drug in both trials.
In both trials.
Yes. They failed in atopic dermatitis and chronic cough. Same drug, placebo's better. Seriously, like if you look at the chronic cough data, there was after 12 weeks of treatment, the drug group had 31% less reduction in cough than the placebo group.
So this drug makes you cough?
Oh no, it's just like I think both of them had a reduction in cough. It's just like this one, you're less likely to lose your cough.
Than nothing. Than placebo.
Than placebo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it works worse than placebo, which means it's like if I just started taking this stuff now, it might make me start coughing.
I wouldn't go that far.
My logic is impeccable here, Max.
I don't know about that. And then,
did it have statistical significance on the other tail that we never talk about? They did do a two-tail test. Did the other tail reach significance?
They didn't provide that data.
They didn't provide that data. This is the one time when they don't provide significance data.
No, no, that's true. But if you look at the atopic dermatitis data from earlier this year, they actually almost hit significance on placebo being better.
Oh God!
So they got to 0.09 on the responder rate analysis and 0.11 in just like the primary endpoint.
I mean, how do you end up at this point? You know what I mean? How does this not crop up? I mean, I can understand like, oh, well, we don't have any effect on our drug, because then before you hit some statistical anomaly, maybe in your phase 2, right? That happens. You're going to run enough trials. Sometimes trials are just going to hit statistical significance in phase 2 when just for random chance. And then you move on to the next trial and you're like, okay, yeah, drug does nothing. Whoopsie.
Or worse than nothing.
But in this case, it's worse than nothing. So how the hell did that happen?
Yeah, twice.
Yeah, twice, 2 times in a row.
Yeah.
This thing is literally doing something bad.
And this is not like a normal bioturd that like was some reverse merger funded by Lindsay Rosenwald or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
This had like A-list VCs invested in it.
Mm-hmm.
Went to IPO. So like they had VC investors like Venbio, Aislinn Capital, Novo Nordisk, and then they were taken public by Piper Jaffray and Jefferies.
Oh God.
So I mean, like this is something that like should be reasonable, not like a complete and utter god awful flop.
Yeah. I mean, all these guys, all these sort of blue chips, they love it when they see a new mechanism, right? They love it when they see like, okay, you guys are actually trying to attack this in a different way that we haven't seen before, and maybe there's some basic science to back that up. But I guess they just got totally boned in this case.
Is that the technical term?
They got boned.
Okay. Oh, another one who I guess maybe they boned themselves.
Oh God, Max, I take it back.
No.
Don't ever say that again.
What is it? Trevina? So Trevina, they did something that I haven't seen in a long time.
Another one with a slightly new mechanism. I actually long ago I liked the mechanism with these guys, right? Because I worked in sort of tangential little area there for a while. These guys are focusing on GPCRs, which are tons of drugs target, but the beta-arrestin pathway, which is so neat. And I've met Bob Lefkowitz, who was the lab that discovered it, and Rick Sirione, who was the graduate student or postdoc, I can't remember which one, that discovered it, was on my PhD committee. So I always kind of liked this one, but they've sort of screwed the pooch for a long time, turns out.
Yeah, I mean, well, they basically lied to the investment community.
Yeah.
I mean, very obviously lied to the investment community. They had done one of those, I think back in 2016, one of those, we had a successful end of phase 2 meeting with the FDA. And they did say that the company had reached general agreement with the FDA on key elements of the phase 3 program to support a new drug application. Now, they just had their FDA advisory committee. Mm-hmm. So the FDA does a presentation. And so the FDA says the FDA did not agree with the proposed dosing in the phase 3 studies. The sponsor proposed dosing up to 100 milligrams daily, but it had only studied maximum daily doses of 36.8 milligrams. Mm-hmm. Furthermore, the sponsor did not have adequate non-clinical support for the proposed doses. And then FDA did not agree with the proposed primary endpoint, as it was unclear how a 30% improvement from baseline correlates to improvement in pain intensity scores, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. And then FDA did not agree with the proposed non-inferiority margin. So, general agreement when the FDA doesn't agree with your dose, your endpoint, or your statistical plan.
Well, I will say after the data actually came out, the FDA also didn't agree with their application. The FDA was like, "Yeah, we don't like it."
Yeah, well, it was voted down at the committee like 7-8. I mean, somehow
the committee also didn't like it so much. The idea behind this drug is it's supposed to be like an opiate that has less respiratory depression, which is kind of neat, right? And how they got about it was kind of a neat way. But yeah, guys, come on. Let the science speak for itself, and don't reinvent the freaking clinical trial. I remember talking with these guys a while back because I was interested in them. I never bought any of them because I was like too scared away from the pain space in general, which is a whole different story. But
we don't give investment advice, but like if you want to get into a pain stock, really think hard about it. It is a very difficult area.
It's really, really difficult. The market looks amazing, but it's really difficult from the regulatory perspective. And I talked with these guys, and they were doing this study involving measuring the rates of basically people, with the morphine pump. So they were both giving them this drug, like a bolus of this drug, and then they also hooked them up to the morphine pump. And I was like, and you're going to try and measure the difference between these things. And they explained all these endpoints, and I was like, gosh, this is just so like, how are you going to actually measure if this is going to make their pain less and that sort of stuff? Like, what about a visual analog scale or something like that, so that they can just rate it or something like that, instead of measuring the number of times they hit the morphine pump after getting a bolus of their drug, right? Yeah, because you might still want to hit the morphine pump because it makes you feel groovy.
Yeah, well, I mean, you do want like some sort of opioid sparing. I mean, that is something.
This is also back in the day. The FDA just issued guidance on an opioid sparing endpoint and how to do an opioid sparing study. And everyone that's tried to do opioid sparing ever has been screwed. This is what Recro did too, right? And where their drug was supposed to be opioid sparing. I can't remember all the details of their readout, but they also didn't get it.
Well, yeah, no, the pain division is just really hard. I mean, opioid sparing, abuse deterrent. I mean, these are just like graveyards.
Yeah.
Well, it's really hard to improve on, opiates. They kind of do work, and anything you do to them to like change them might not be so great.
I don't know. Maybe we should come up with a different. We know there are different mechanisms of pain relief out there. There are other ways to stop pain. We have several different classes of drugs that do this. You have NSAIDs, you have anesthesia, you have nerve blocks, right? I actually like this one mechanism. I think some people were studying. I think Xenon was studying this at one point. But I like this mechanism, right? This is for peripheral pain. There's a particular ion channel. I think it's the sodium voltage gated 5.7 channel, which is only present in the sensory neurons in your periphery, right? Okay. So just stop that channel, right? You can stop a nerve impulse. So literally the pain signal will get to it wherever it's blocked, and then boop, can't get past. So you can use this as a nerve block. You can take it systemically. You just don't feel pain.
That sounds good.
Sounds good, right?
Yeah.
New mechanism. It's kind of neat. I don't know where this is. I might have to patch back in me saying later, oh, this doesn't work either in post-production. But it's neat, right? There's other ways to go about pain than just hitting the opioid receptors. Because those never end up like being better than opiates. And now we have super opiates.
Yes. So anyway, this Trevena... move actually reminded me of something that happened a long time ago. GPC Biotech, which I think I mentioned on a previous podcast, did exactly the same thing, except they claimed that they had an SPA, and the FDA was like, no, we never agreed on your endpoints. We didn't even agree on the pain scale that you used. You're using a non-standard one. We want just a standard Likert one. Yada yada, and it didn't end well for them either. I mean, what Trevena did really gets to the level of SEC should really be looking at it.
Yeah, they lied.
Yeah, they obviously lied. I mean, they essentially they said agreement secured.
Yeah, and I feel the worst. I feel bad for everyone involved here. I feel bad for the investors in this company because they were making reasoned decisions about what they were told, and that's just unfair. And I also feel bad for all the other people outside the management, outside the people that were in that meeting who obviously got lied to too, right? Can you imagine just working at a company and realize that your management has been lying to you about the chances of you actually being a real company forever?
But somehow, I'm going to have to look at like maybe the transcripts or something of this. 7 of the 8 people on the committee still voted yes. Or 7 out of the 15, it was a 7-8 vote. So management lied? It doesn't matter. I think the drug works. Yeah.
Well, it looks to me, I looked over the data casually, and it looks like there's definitely an effect. It's definitely like an opiate. And the question is, what's the degree to which it is actually better than, an opiate in terms of respiratory depression? I believe the FDA also disagreed with their respiratory endpoint, which was like the key one, because that's what makes this drug different and interesting. Yeah. And they said your endpoint here is like poorly defined. It was like, I can't remember what it was. like respiratory distress symptoms reported by the doctor, and they're like, yeah, you have to do something better than that, like an FEV or something. I don't know.
Yeah. So anyway, that was unfortunate. And I mean, as an investor, it is really frustrating when they just outright lie to you. You can kind of challenge certain assumptions of management, but when they say one thing and there's no way to verify it, it's just impossible. And this is a great reason for why I think certain parts of FDA meeting minutes should be released publicly, so that this doesn't happen. Obviously there will be parts of it that are trade secrets. So, black those out. But like, how about the parts where they actually discuss, if they approve of a primary endpoint or not, or if they view a primary endpoint as approvable or not, like maybe have that shown so that, you could make a real decision. Because also a lot of the times that the companies will say they had a successful end of phase 2 meeting, what the FDA will have actually said would be, well, this is a review decision. So it's not that the FDA said, oh yeah, if you hit the endpoint in this trial, we will approve you. It's more like, well, when you show us the data, we'll think about it. And like, if I had that information for companies, I'd be like, oh, so the FDA's not really behind your endpoint. So there's a lot more risk than you're letting on. I think investors really have a right to know this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know why the FDA is gagged in this case, because it doesn't serve anyone. You know what I mean? Like, what interest is there in the government in keeping the FDA quiet in this? From even like an industry standpoint, even when you say they're pro-industry, this is bad for the industry. This is bad for investors, right?
Bio would hate that because they would be like, well, then it would make it harder for our member companies to raise money. So anyway, I also want, so the markets have been kind of funky this week.
Yeah, they have been kind of funky.
They were funky earlier this year too, back in like February, and now again, really for unknown reasons, other than the fact that we've had excessive markets for quite a while. I'm not quite sure what the spark is, but like I did notice, like, for example, mortgage rates are now above 5%.
Yep.
Which is like tremendously high for anyone, I don't know, under the age of 30.
Yeah.
Like they have not seen it.
It's crazy. I remember listening to like ads, because I listen to a lot of podcasts. Why do you think I do this? But I'm listening to ads on various podcasts, and some of them are these mortgage rate ones. These like, oh, switch to this new rate. And they're like, the mortgage companies have been trying to get people on these variable rates recently too. And I'm like, how crooked is that, man? You're going to try and get somebody to switch over to a variable rate right before the rates start going up? I've been seeing a lot of that, or listening to a lot of that in these ads.
Oh yeah, no, there's so much going on. Debt levels, quality of debt, stuff that's going on in China. I mean, China, these tariffs from Trump seem to be. I mean, I know the whole point of it was really just to change the balance of trade, but it seems to be having a really major effect on the Chinese economy, which might have like kind of bang on effects on everything else, because they are such a major driver. Yeah. So it could be something like that's going on, and people have been lulled with the sense of BTFD, just buy the dip whenever the market goes down. But at some point, like I'm reading this book by Howard Marks from Oak Tree Capital on cycles, and I do recommend it to people. It just talks about how, like, look, it's like a pendulum. Eventually, it has to swing the other way. There doesn't even need to be a reason. I mean, people still don't know the reason why the 2000 tech bubble burst. There wasn't like some piece of news. They just started falling because people were expecting 70% annual returns every year.
Well, like Microsoft had their antitrust thing against them, which is like literally the day it started turning. And I don't know how that exactly triggered it, but maybe everyone just had a collective come to Jesus moment, like, oh my God, these little companies aren't worth billions of dollars.
No, Microsoft though was like still a huge company then, and I don't
Oh,
think,
yeah.
it wasn't like that was they weren't the ones that are going up like 100% a year. It was like the Cisco's or currently bankrupt companies like JDS, Uniphase, Nortel Networks, Pets.com. You had like you had all these things. Like I mean, Priceline almost went out of business. There were all these things that they were trading on price to eyeballs, price to story. And we have it now. I mean, look, Snap.
Yeah, we're kind of in the middle of another one of these, and those guys have been getting hammered.
Yeah, but they're still like a $7 billion company.
Yeah, I'll try to explain Snapchat to you, Max.
I
just don't get it.
I really
just don't get
I'm
it.
an old fogey. I don't get it. I just don't get half of
the
the stuff.
more filters you have, right, the better.
Why?
Because have you seen like the cute little puppy ones?
You mean like where people put like puppy dog ears on each other or something, or cat whiskers?
Yeah.
I don't know what the point of it is. It makes you look stupid.
Oh, it looks cute.
Next, you're going to tell me Phantom Menace was the best Star Wars movie.
But the next thing you get is you get tie-ins. You get tie-in filters, right?
Okay, which is?
Like a Brita filter.
What?
There you go. I guess like, look at me. I filter water now.
Okay. By the way, I think you're too old to know how Snapchat works unless you're using it for like the Anthony Weiner reason.
But I know how Snapchat works.
What? You shouldn't.
You snap a picture and it goes over the internet to somebody. Maybe a lot of people.
But then it disappears.
Sometimes. Not all the time.
So why don't you just like take a picture with your phone and send it to people?
Well, why don't you just do that with Instagram too?
Well, I think that's why Snapchat's going out of business because of Instagram.
Well, yeah, because Instagram is Facebook. So
yes.
And they got bought out.
The Facebook monolith. I really actually I think I hate all the monoliths. Like the Apple monolith. The
Do you
Google
hate
monolith.
Netflix? You don't hate Netflix because you love Netflix.
Okay, so I used to love Netflix. I mean, I've been a Netflix user since I think the year 2000 or 2001.
Me too. Yeah.
So
it was great
long time.
in New York back then because you could get the turnaround time was like a day.
Well, no. So I signed up when they only had one warehouse or distribution center in San Jose. So it took a few days to get.
So you are older than me.
Yeah, I am. And they were actually really nice around September 11th because they basically gave you a free movie because like the postal system was like totally out of whack then. It took forever. So they this was back when it was just a DVD service. So instead of having 3 movies out at the same time, you could have 4. It was really great. They had a wonderful library. It was really useful. And now I'm just doing streaming only. And I don't know, the quality of their stuff is meh most of the time. Some of their stuff is good.
Yeah, but what are you going to compare it against?
And also, like,
you're going to compare it against HBO? Like, HBO has got, like, one, like, okay show on at any given time.
Yes.
Right? And, like, a few other, like, meh shows. And then, like, a steaming pile of movie garbage.
Okay, but I think... Well, no, they have good movies.
They have, like, 1 or 2, but so does Netflix.
No, okay, but I think HBO is actually profitable. Netflix used to make money, and now they're just like they're burning like $10 billion a year or something. Like because they're actually producing their own content, and most of the content is meh, and it's not driving subscriber growth, and it's
my buddy who's actually worked on productions for Netflix. He works for an independent company that's done these sorts of things. He actually worked on the Dirty Money one. He said that basically Netflix is like sucking all the oxygen out of the room. Like they're going to outbid you for anything good, and good or bad. Yeah, and so no one else can get any decent content. That's kind of what they're aiming for right now. So like if HBO is going to do anything, it's got to be like homespun, which is a lot harder.
But I mean, they still come out with quality television, and this Netflix boom will only last as long as the debt cycle is in their favor, because at some point, you can't just be burning that much money. You're going to run out of money.
It's true.
And they might have to cut back. It's not, what can't go on forever doesn't. Mm-hmm. So, and this can't go on forever. So, but I don't consider Netflix part of the monolith anyway. I'm talking about like the really big boys, like the Facebooks, the Googles, the Apples. Apple that charges $1,500 for a freaking phone.
Yeah.
I mean, like, look, I have an Apple iPhone right now. When it breaks, I refuse to pay that much money for
So
a
you're
new one.
going to Android.
I'm going to have to go to Android, which is unfortunately Google.
There's some good Androids out there.
Yeah, no, I know there are good Androids, but it's like, you have like so much on the cloud, and there's all these other services, and I have an Apple Watch, but like I refuse to pay these, hostage prices.
Yeah, they feel like you've got to stick with it forever because they don't play well with anyone else.
And also, they took away this stupid, jack for my headphones, so I have to have Bluetooth with the headphones, and I've forgotten for 2 days in a row now to charge them.
Oh, I have something to say about the whole China thing too, which is like, oh yeah, China is acting a bit more verkauft, is what I have to say. But also, have you seen the stuff with Ford? Ford's doing layoffs. They're gonna have something like $1 billion and more expenses, and so Ford's actually going through with layoffs.
Well,
So it's impacting like good American companies too.
Well,
Like Ford.
Well, first of all, I think there's a few things going on here. First of all, because the Chinese economy is kind of not crashing, but it's having trouble. They're buying a lot fewer cars. So I don't know what percentage of the auto market they were, but I'm sure that's having some impact.
I know they're like I saw the number of like their exports to China are down by like half or something like that.
And Ford is, I think most of their sales is the Ford F-150.
Yeah.
And gas prices are kind of going up.
Yeah, that's true.
So do you want to have a gas guzzler car? And like, what other cars do they make that are any good? Like the Ford Focus? I mean, like what Ford are you going to get?
Yeah, F-150 is some huge portion of the revenue.
Yeah, it's like China getting sick is going to get everyone else a cold.
Yeah.
And that's going to cause some problems. And, but I have to say, Trump attacking the chairman of the Fed does nobody any favors.
That was scary. He's not going to fire him, though. Are we going to fire the chairman of the Fed over like a dip for 2 days? Oh my God.
I want. I would be in favor of invoking the 25th Amendment if anything like that happens, because like don't mess with the Fed. I don't want this easy money.
We ain't fans of the Fed. Let's face facts here. Let's be real.
No, but it's only because there's been horrible Fed chairs for really the last, I don't know, since like 2005. I mean, not a fan of Bernanke, not a fan of Yellen. Greenspan was sometimes good, and then I think Powell is doing a reasonable job. I think he's not too hawkish, not too dovish. He seems to be trying to do the right thing, and he doesn't need the orange menace going after him. I think what the Fed's doing is crazy, and then he goes off on like some safety margin thing, which I really didn't understand what he was saying.
Yeah, I mean, and this is this whole thing with Trump and him being pissed at the Fed sort of speaks to a problem I've seen with the economy in general, is the whole propping up the stock owners and the land owners and people that are the ones that already have got the stuff, and not the people that are to potentially sell the stuff, whatever it is in the world, and not necessarily the people that are buying stuff or saving money or doing anything else in the economy. So it's stockholders. We want the stock market to be in a positive trajectory forever, regardless of any of the fundamentals. Right? Stocks have to go up forever because the investors need to make money, right? Instead of people making money as investors because they chose a company that's actually making money.
Yes.
Right? And it's a departure from the fundamentals of how things should work. And everything else, it should go down. And things should be well priced so that it's fair to both the buyers and the sellers at the same time. And you can say this for like large swaths of how like the government has sort of treated the economy for a long time, propping up homeowners instead of people that might want to buy a home, and that's why housing prices always end up going through the roof.
Well, except for a certain period of time.
Yes, exactly, because these bubbles.
Yes, they have to keep inflating more bubbles to keep the stock market going, and so many people don't have real jobs.
Yeah, I don't remember who it was that said it, but. I know one person blamed, the bankers, for some of these bubbles, because they realized that all it takes is, as a a cabal of bankers. If you can cause a bubble to happen, you can get yourself rich, and it doesn't really matter what anything else that happens after that because you're already rich, and you can bail out. And so like these bankers sort of just keep on manufacturing these things, and there's no sort of balance.
Well, that's like the healthcare venture capital market, or really any health venture capital market at this point. I mean, I think they've just de-risked their portfolio for the next 5 years in the last year because, with Allogene, for example, they started the company a year ago. Series A was 6 months ago, and it's gone public. So they're just like cramming everything through the window. So they don't care if anything actually works or actually saves even a single life. They have their exit, they get their money, they go on vacation. They don't care. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, they're all they're doing is they mark up their own stuff, say how great it is, and then like look at Menlo. They take it public, and they find like greater fools to buy it, and then they're worse than placebo.
I promise you, with Menlo, there had to have been something rotten to get those results. There's something rotten at the core of that.
Yes.
Yeah, like somebody's not paying attention to like a really key thing that is going on because it's like something real is happening that are screwing those results, and it's not just bad luck or no results.
Yeah, but it's not like they just had like one big investor either. I mean, they had so many. I mean, unless it's just sort of like, well, I know I'm buddies with this guy at Aisling and he's pretty good. So if he likes it, I like it. I don't need to do due diligence. I mean, that does happen.
All right.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, it does.
So anyway, I think I'm all out.
You're all out? No more news this week?
No, it's been a relatively quiet week, I think, other than like the market's crashing occasionally.
Yeah, quiet except for the market crashing.
So anyway, please subscribe and review us on iTunes.
All right. Later, guys. Our theme music is by Hazar.